Hello, wonderful human! Welcome to my very first tutorial of painting. So, I've taught a lot in person, but this is my first one online, so please help me make this video successful by leaving me a comment, even if it's just an emoji, and liking the video, hit that like button, as well as sharing it with a friend. For some reason, I couldn't find footage of me painting the backgrounds, but essentially all it is just splattering colors on there in any which way, because that's just the color that's going to come through. So you can see the various different backgrounds that I chose to work with in the tutorial and get an idea of how you can make those washes and just random colors show through later on. I was just using regular old Gulf wax that you can buy in any grocery store in the canning goods section, and a candle warmer, as well as an old candle tin. So I'm excited for you to see how this works. This background is dry. You want to make sure that your paper is dry before dripping wax on it. So now it's time for the wax. I have my paper at an elevation because I'm trying to get the wax to drip down to make little trees, because I decided to do a forest here. I decided to use the lighter part of the paper up here because your sky is your lightest value. Again, usually watercolor is done flat because gravity will take over. And this isn't meant to be perfect. You know, my trees are not completely perpendicular. And that's the nice thing about this wax technique, is that it's supposed to not be perfect. Little drips here and there. I put the wax inside an old metal candle tin. Metal will melt the wax faster than glass, but you do have to be careful because if it gets too hot, it can make these like black marks. It just soaks right into your paper. So sometimes you do want a couple little dots here and there. So this is one technique that you can do with the wax, just dripping it. Now I'm going to flatten my surface for the next piece. I like to work with multiple pieces at a time because it takes time for watercolor to dry, and that just works better with my attention span. So this is simply where you can just draw lines. You can't really see what I'm doing because what I'm putting on is clear, and you're thinking about reverse. You don't want the wax to be too thick because then when you melt it off, it's going to make these big old wax spots, and it's just really hard to melt off a ton of wax without kind of compromising your piece. You can also draw rings, drip dots. This piece is going to get a lot of wax because I really like the background of this one, so I want a lot of it to show through. Because you're working in reverse with the end goal in mind, so everything that you're covering up with the wax is going to show up in the end. I honestly really liked this piece even before putting wax on it, but I can always paint it again if it turns out to be overworked. There's a fine line between overworking your paintings and finding something that you like. I always say that if you like it, leave it, and if you don't like it, there's still work to be done. I really like stripes. This piece already has a lot of stripes, so I'm just adding more in. Little curves. This is obviously going to be an abstract piece. You can use different size brushes, but again, you can't really be particular with this. So now I have wax over pretty much the entire paper, and I feel pretty satisfied, so then I can move on. Alrighty, so this next piece, I put salt on it, which created these amazing patterns. They're a lot like snowflakes. That also is a fine line because you can do too much salt or too much water. So again, it's really a practice, trying out new things, testing out things, figuring out where that middle ground is and what works for the style that you're going for. So just rubbing off the salt. And again, this piece is completely dry. I left this piece overnight to dry. Giving its own natural time to dry is going to save these very unique sort of patterns. Whereas if you dry it with a hairdryer, although that works, especially if your attention span is short, you're just not going to be able to save some of those beautiful patterns. So I'm just putting some really random stuff on here. For me, doing abstracts, I don't really have to think about them. But you could easily, you know, paint flowers or fish These sorts of pieces work really well with water scenes, just because they are so bubbly. So again, I've been doing all these shapes, but I also can splatter it. One way to splatter is to just take the brush and go boop, boop, boop. Another way is to tap like this. I learned that from an art student in my class. And that makes more controlled splatters, and they're smaller. So this now officially has a lot of splatters all over it. This, I think, is going to make a really good background for a Sharpie drawing over top. Getting off that salt. So the way I learned this technique is drawing with a Sharpie your image and then painting over it. So you can draw a picture with Sharpie before you do the watercolor. You could also just do this one layer of color, but I thought I'd give you an example of Sharpie. Sharpie is waterproof, so you're not going to run into any issues if you paint over it with the water. I love doing Sharpie over top of watercolor because it has that gritty feel to the paper. I have some go-tos when it comes to drawing where I like to stick to various things because sometimes it's hard to think about what you want to paint or draw in the first place. So if you have some things that you like to do, that's always easier than coming up with ideas. I also like to go for cartoons for the same reason because it's just easier. Of course, I like to challenge myself. So composition-wise, this is vertical. You don't want all your pieces to be horizontal, but you also don't want them all to be vertical. You can also do diagonal or get different shapes going, cut your paper into circles, which I might start doing more. That's one reason I love making art and I love teaching, is because I get ideas in the process of making. And I have really been trying to get away from squares in my acrylic painting process because they just seem very limiting. It's like think outside the box kind of vibes. You can also draw with pencil and then do Sharpie over. One of the things I think about with Sharpie is that if I mess up, it's just meant to be that way, and with practice you get better. I used to pretty much only draw in markers exclusively. So again, composition-wise, this flower is right in the center. And so this piece is kind of breaking those rules about having things be off-centered, and there's something kind of amateur about having something right in the middle. But again, same for cartoons. They can be interpreted as amateur, but I like to kind of push the boundaries and do something that feels right to me and feels good that might not fit the art rules out there. But again, it's going to be really helpful to off-center and balance this very centered piece by adding in some flowers on the outside. Something you might get caught up in is doing everything in one dimension. So like here's one and here's one, but you can also cross the pieces to kind of create more depth. And so this one's here. Well, I guess I should go here. This one's here. So this one might be here to balance that out. If I wanted perfect symmetry, then yeah, having this one in the middle and having the two parallel to each other would create that symmetry feel. But this is kind of like off-centered symmetry, which kind of just shows you that you want to think about those composition pieces such as symmetry, but then add in, you know, a little quirk to it. You want to take your time when making art. You want to kind of dig into those feelings you're looking for of relaxation, or maybe it's release. Maybe it is simplicity. Maybe it is the ability to be free and move outside of boundary norms. So here I'm going to draw a little flower bud because that's going to add some dimension to the piece. Cute. That's why I love cartoons, because they're so cute. They just make me happy. Okay, so I like how this is looking. You could also, you know, go overboard with it and draw all kinds of things, but we're going to keep it simple for now. Also, this is a red foam piece that my physical therapist said I could use that allows for a larger grip, and you still have a ton of precision. Okay, so this might be how you add in wax to an actual picture where you're not just trying to make various different lines. So maybe I would want to save some of these flower petals, but I don't maybe want to save all the way to the line. So, you know, just sticking in a couple dots. When you're painting something like a rose, you do want to kind of save those highlights. So this rose is going to have orange highlights because that is the color I'm covering up. And what you cover up is going to stay. That's the masking and resisting aspect of the wax. So I'm using a smaller brush in the wax for this. That's going to give me a little bit more precision. Then maybe I want to save some lines, kind of like I did here, but I forgot to put lines in these leaves. So maybe the lines in these leaves are going to be made of wax. So they're going to have that line down the middle and the little pieces. And then, you know, if your brush is running out of wax, just keep dipping it. Many people just try to go too far without re-dipping it, and sorry, but that's just not going to work. You almost have to dip it every single stroke because it's cooling off on you. So you have to be kind of quick about it. This one, see, I needed 2 dips to do that line. And I do like the idea of these all having these little lines, so we're going to make a couple veins coming off of them. So I'm splattering some in the background too. It's going to get over top of the flowers in spots as well. I don't really want to overdo this too much because it is going to get on top of the flowers and maybe mess up some of what I've already accomplished with those lines. And we're back. Drinking some hot chocolate. Taking some much needed deep breaths. It's hard to go from everything that goes on in the day to this, so you have to have a space kind of where you're just saying goodbye to the day and hello to creation. Showing up to make the art is what's important. So dipping the paintbrush in water, choosing the right paintbrush. Water helps you decide how much paint is going to be on your piece. The right shaped brush is going to give you the shape you're looking for. Simple. This is going to make a square shape. So you can put down water first if you want, and then you can put paint on it, and it'll spread out among where that water is. Again, more water to brush up more paint and less water to get those darker colors. These are looking like stripes, but they're supposed to be trees. Just really love striped trees. You can play around different ways of making a tree. These are probably my favorite brushes because you can do really thin lines as well as thick ones all at the same time without switching brushes. Can add in different colors. So some of these drips are starting to show through. If you want them all to show through, we have to add color to every space. But of course, with other watercolor painting, you can always leave the background as is. I was always taught that with watercolor, you leave your paper white and you add in the color slowly across the piece, which is one way of doing it. But when working in layers with the wax, you have to work in layers and it can't just be all one layer on white. Now if this tree is touched, since it's wet, this color is going to disperse itself to the edges of those waters. So I don't want to do too much. I don't want it to be too crowded. So here we have composition. 3, 3, 1. Oop. I'm going to do one more tree. Only because I started one more tree, not because of the numbers. But I don't know. I just kind of let this composition come about without plan. But I was trying to have some start off the page and then have some start in the back and some front. This is kind of a little symmetry-like, but I kind of like how it contrasts the other 3 trees. So a lot of art is just letting it come about, letting it happen. And I think after the fact, it's nice to know what's happening, but not to try to do it as it's happening. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the background. so you can see what I mean about making some of these drips show up. For that, I am going to use this same type of brush, but smaller version. Okay, I need a break from the brown. So here, I just want some really bright blue happening. That's all I want. Oh, I'm just feeling it right now. This you just want to be patient with. I'm also using my pinky to brace myself because this could be wet still. That kind of raises my hand up off of the paper. But if it is dry, pull up your sleeves and rest your whole hand, your knuckle and your wrist right there on the paper. I started over here, but I realized that I'm going to be dragging my hand through the wet paint, so I moved over here. This blue was not at all what I imagined for this painting, but here it goes. It's happening. Just let it create itself kind of vibe. Oop, putting my hand in the paint. Getting some more blue in there. If you paint really thick with watercolor, it will layer up. The only reason I can do this blue over this brown is because the brown is very light colored. So you do see the brown through the blue. It affects your paint on top because of what you can see through it and how the light is going to hit it. So mixing brown into blue, you can imagine what that would do. It would darken it and it would dull it. If I am going to want to dull a blue though, I would probably dull it with the tiniest little bit of orange because they're complementary colors. So if you were to mix an orange with a blue, it would make brown essentially, which is what we have here, brown. But if you're not going for brown and you're just going for a dull blue, tiny bit of orange. Same for any other color you're trying to dull. You just use its complementary color on the color wheel, which just means it's the color across from whatever color. Oh, so another thing I'm doing here is I'm actually leaving this brown outlining the trees, which you may have noticed, and I'm sure you did. That is because if the trees are wet, like this one, it's not going to mix. Like I just touched them over here, and they were both wet, and now they're mixing. You know, it's kind of a cool look, but you wouldn't want your entire forest to be washed out like that. Or maybe you would. I was not expecting to paint blue and green trees either, but that would be me for you. I'm always painting really colorful forests. I guess this is just how being out in nature feels to me. Plus, I just really love bright colors. Drop a comment and let me know what your favorite sorts of colors and color schemes are. I just want a brown foreground, but it needs to look different than my other brown. Because it doesn't have to look different. Again, I'm giving these trees some breadth when I go around it with the paint. I just wanted to say that word. Breadth. If it is helping you, just let me know, because that really encourages me to keep going. Because it's actually really a challenge to not let social media affect your mental health, especially when you put something out that you spent so long on and you cared so much about, and you just hear crickets. But I'd say crickets might be better than trolls because, man, I recently got trolled on a Facebook group and I cried. I mean, it was so bad. I don't know. It was weird. I'm like, how am I attracting that to myself? What kind of energy am I putting out? I know that my energy is not always the best. I mean, who is it? None of us are perfect. I think that we have to remind ourselves that none of us are perfect because, man, sometimes I can hold myself to quite the standard, an unachievable standard, and a lot of times I have no motivation to be held to any standard. It just depends on the ever-changing, ever-fluctuating moods. I just can't tell you how great it is to paint because I just don't even think about all that at all. It's nice to just focus on something and get into a different brain state, which is the flow zone, and just be inspired from that place. I've always viewed it as like a place of prayer, and I try to be aware of my gratitude every day. Okay, so that's the layer of the trees. You can kind of see what it's going to look like when you pull the wax off. I might do something real quick with this. So it's just looking a little bland. So I'm going to put water here, and maybe that's my problem is I just need a bigger brush because you do run the challenge of a space drying on you before you're ready, and at the same time some spots you're like, man, I wish they would dry. So this is the last thing I'm doing to this piece before I set it aside to dry. So I don't really care if this takes a long time to dry, because putting this much water on this piece is definitely, like, it's pooling. It's gonna take a while to dry. So I can show you the pools. Yeah, that's a lot of water. See how much water is on that paper. Okay, now I would like to touch this with colors, and it'll spread out. The colors will. The color I'm putting on here is also very watery, because that water is gonna help it spread out. My plan is to put a lot of paint on here and then put the salt on it. There, see, it's actually spilling off the paper. You can do watercolor, like tape to a cardboard and stuff. I mean, that's usually how I do it. I don't know how we got to this place without the preparations, but here we are. I need a new paper towel. This one is seen better days. Usually I just put those up to dry and reuse some dry ones. You're excited to make art, so you really want your materials to reflect that. Like, I like to keep my art studio so organized, and just, I know where every last little thing is, and things that I'm working on, projects, I try to keep out where I can see them. That just keeps me dreaming on them, really, you know? I have tried using other things besides paper towels, like old t-shirts and stuff, and it just doesn't work. You can make patterns by, you know, touching a paper towel to it, but it soaks up a lot of the water, so that's not really the pattern I'm looking for. Okay, a little bit more color. Putting in some black. It's gonna get dark. What are you gonna do? It's gonna look cool. Attack! Yeah, this paper's getting super warped. It usually dries flat though. Okay, so salt, you know, just, we'll see what happens. Set it aside. Next, this one I'm pretty stoked on. I think I'm gonna use this pretty brush. This is all light. We're gonna need to put something dark over top of it for it to show up. Ooh, this is really exciting. I can't wait to see how this happens. All right, I'm gonna ease my way in with like a semi-dark, but mostly just because I love this color. Oh, this could get crazy. I definitely need something darker than that. I'll use the same color darker. Ooh, you just really gotta dig into those paints sometimes. I really dig into them because I want dark, potent colors with my watercolors. Some people really focus on the nuance to do just where you can barely see the color and you have to really pay attention. I feel like even with bright colors, you have to really pay attention to all this stuff if you want to enjoy the piece fully. So I've just played around with color combinations for years, but I kind of just go with whatever I feel drawn towards. So now I feel drawn towards navy blue. I don't know if this is navy blue, but it's blue. I might just have to add a little black to it to make it darker, but I just mixed a dark blue the other day. Let's see how dark it is. Ooh, it's pretty dark. That's exactly what I'm looking for. This would also look good with some salt. Maybe, I don't know. Dude, look at that pink. This is gonna be really pretty. There's like a little triangle that happened there. Okay, I have no idea where I was going with this one. Just gonna put some colors on there. I'm thinking red. The fun part about these pieces is that they are surprises. Sometimes I make these backgrounds, melt the wax off, and they become the background of another piece. Or, you know, I recently wrote poetry on it because, like, they're so abstract, but I think it's just fun to do it. You know, like, you can't be so meticulous and just spend like every little ounce of attention and focus and time. Oh yeah, I just like this one. It looks great. Now a color in between purple and red, fuchsia. I really want to get better at learning the names of colors. I have this little book. Okay, so we've been using salt on the others, so this time let's mix it up and use rubbing alcohol. It's not really doing much, but ooh, that one did something. I think it's just too much water here pooled to do this. Put this one aside. Okay, next up, the beautiful flowers. Again, you want to choose the right brush here, so I'll probably use a round brush. You can always test it out before you use it. And I'll paint the flowers first and then the background because I want to be able to rest my hand on the background starting from left to right, just like you would write or read a book, because then you can rest your hand. You can do a color, and then I just dipped this in the water just now. I didn't even get more paint. That's pretty watery there, right there, and so it's gonna mix well if I put something in there, and I do want to put some yellow. I just want this leaf to be very lime green, sort of. Oh yeah, like I love that yellow. It's so pretty. So just going in the water, I didn't pick up more paint. Again, just going in the water. Like you can, there's so much pigment in your brush, you just need more water sometimes. If you don't want it to be super dark. And like this yellow is super potent, so you don't really need it to be super dark. All right, get some more green in there. I did the yellow first so that I can dip my green brush into my green paint, even if it does have yellow on it, because like yellow's not really going to contaminate green that much, but green is definitely going to contaminate the yellow if you keep dipping your brush back in it. Alright, getting some green here. Okay, I feel like that color choice came from this yellow. The yellow's in the background, so I really wanted something like that. And then there's really not a lot of cool colors back here. Like purple is, but it's on the warmer side, if you really see it. And so I'm kind of leaning towards the warmer side of the color spectrum. I wonder what color I am gonna make the background. So my camera turned off. I didn't actually get the last little bit here of what I was painting. I was trying to teach at the same time, so I guess we missed a little bit, but covered the background in orange. I let the purple show through the orange. I darkened up this rose by putting in more layers of pink and purple. I also see that that rose is the focal point of the piece, and that is created by that contrast, that dark rose against that super bright yellow. Now this is the real exciting part. This is the surprising part. We're melting off the wax. There's something so whimsical about putting a crossword puzzle on top of your art. So you could do as many layers of wax as you want, but sometimes it looks best with just one. So the wax is getting soaked up by the newspaper, as you can see. I feel the paper, I can still feel there's wax on this, so I'm gonna keep ironing. It's like 11 at night. I'm here for it. I'm just too excited not to go ahead and do this. You want to go ahead and get new paper when you start to see the wax shine through like this. Otherwise it really just soaks into the watercolor paper. A salty artwork here. Feeling the wax. All I feel is salt. The salt just looks so sparkly. Sometimes I just like to make things in batches. If one's done, they're all done. And I can still add to them. It's not the end. But typically when you put the wax in a spot on the paper, you're not going to be able to cover up that wax with any more paint ever, because it stays in the paper to some extent. I was taught this technique on rice paper, but I've not been able to find the rice paper for sale that I was taught on, and furthermore, it's see-through, so you need like a white piece of paper behind it. I just have this iron set on the highest setting because I want my wax to melt fast and get back to the real world. Not really. This one now I know is not done. We have some time to spend together still. Look at that. So into wax like this. Like those bubbles look really sweet. Look, that's a total face right there. Did not intend to, and that's an L. And that could be a T. It almost looks like my name, like T-L-Y-L-L-L. This could also be two people with their arms out, hugging or something. I could totally just paint little eyeballs and little teeth inside this. That would be interesting too, is like start out with these watercolor bases and then go over top with acrylic paint. A lot of times, one way to figure out if art is done is to set it up where you can see it for a couple days and look at it, and maybe even by your bed when you first wake up in the morning. And it's a big insight to do that, for sure. Of course, another way you can do it is take a photograph of it and then change your photograph to black and white on your phone, and you can see the value and where the value lies in the piece. Or you can also flip it sideways so that you see it in reverse, like you can literally flip it. Just getting a different view. Please let me know what you thought about this video in the comments. Not just to get comments, but so that I can perfect my teaching skills. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you were able to create along with me, and please send me images of what you made. I would love to see them, and I have contact stuff on my website and on my YouTube bio thing. Alright, bye! Peace, love.